Okay, good evening everybody once again. It's Mark Lloyd from Property Mastery Academy and wanted to welcome you to this evening's webinar about a very interesting topic, attracting property investment. And with our guest speaker this evening, Dr. Martin Davies, who I will introduce to you shortly. So at some stage during our investing career, we will need to find money. And this is really what this webinar is about. And Martin is extremely experienced in it, and he'll explain to you, obviously, as he goes along, the kind of concepts and processes he uses through many, many years of experience. But what I want to kick off with, first of all, is if you've not attended a webinar before, okay, basic formats are ask questions. So that box on the right-hand side of the screen, type questions in there, and what we'll do is we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. And take notes as you go along. We will record the webinar, but sometimes the recordings don't always come out very well. So just in case, take notes as we go along, and that will also help you to prompt on questions as well. We're aiming for the webinar to last about an hour, so we should finish around about 8:30-ish, depending on number of questions, but we'll go as long as we need to get your questions answered. Okay, so that's the basic format. We will be talking about a masterclass workshop that Dr. Martin Davies is running on the 19th to 20th of March in Farnham. So we'll tell you a little bit about that later on, and Martin will expand on what he's going to cover on that particular workshop. But first of all, what I want to do is just tell you a little bit about Property Mastery Academy. I know some of you on the webinar this evening are aware of who we are. Some of you I recognise as new faces. So let's just tell you a little bit about Property Mastery Academy. We formed this in 2012, set up to provide innovative and unique training courses and mentorship programs for property investors. So the kind of programs that we run, I doubt you'll find anywhere else. I'm fairly confident of that. Who runs the company? Who owns the company? Well, you've got myself and Jackie. We've been business partners for quite some time. We have a portfolio of properties throughout the UK. We have Valerie, who's a life and business coach, so adds a different perspective to the company. And Paul Merrick, based in Scotland, and entrepreneur, property investor, and he has a debt-free portfolio. Some of you may well have seen Paul recently talking around some of the network meetings. Very interesting concepts that he talks about as well. So that's a basic introduction to Property Mastery Academy for those of you that are not aware of who we are. So what I want to do now is just pass you over to Dr. Martin Davies, who will take you through the remainder of the presentation. As I say, please ask questions as you go along. We will aim to answer as many of those as we possibly can towards the end. Okay, so Martin, I'm just going to give you control of the screen. You should see a box come up. And hopefully you've now got control.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, great. Okay, well, hello, everybody. Great to be here, and I'll just off we go. Right. So property, interesting stuff, isn't it? But here's the interesting thing. However much cash you start out, at some stage you run out. And so what I'm here to do is to talk to you about how you can find and attract people with money to invest in your property deals. So I'm going to touch a bit about me, and then I'm going to talk about sort of how I ran out of money in my property journey, how I got money, over £1 million worth from other people, and hopefully show you how you can go about doing that. Oh, hello, it's gone the wrong way. Is that me or was that you, Mark? Right. Hello. I'm trying to move this thing.
Yeah, that should be you. So if you click on the screen, Martin, that should take you to the next slide.
Okay, good. Okay, yes, I recognize that person. So this is me, born in London, affluent family, academic mother, entrepreneurial father who was in the fashion trade and actually made a chunk of money out of property in the 50s and 60s. Educated at school in London, went to Oxford, read physics, and then at the end of my first degree, because I stayed on in another one, I had a really interesting conversation with my father, and he said, "Do you want to do property with me, Martin, as a career? Because I've been offered a street in North London." And I didn't kind of react to that terribly much. And the problem is this: my father was a manic depressive, bipolar we'd call it today. And what happened, that meant you didn't know one day to the next whether he was going to be up or down or whatever. And I could just about cope with that, with him being my father, but the idea of him being a business partner as well, or me working for him or with him, I just couldn't get my mind around that. And it was a real problem to me because I actually wanted to do it, but I didn't feel able to do that at all. And so I said no. And it was literally, so I went off and I spent 26 years in IBM, doing sort of salesy sort of stuff, took the package, left IBM, set up an attraction marketing organization called NRG some sort of 12 years ago. And then it was 4 years ago, my son, Rupert, sort of asked me, he said, "You know, I'm really interested in this property stuff and I want to do it. And I want to do it with somebody, I want to do it with you." And it was like an elastic band over the sort of last 35 years had gone twang. And suddenly I realized that what I really had been wanting to do was to engage in property, and it took my son to re-trigger that. And that's the reason why I'm in property. So we started off on our property journey about 4 years ago, and so the first thing we did, went out, we bought a flat in Bracknell, new flat, and we spent a third of our capital and ended up with £350 per month net. So I said to Rupert, well, that's not going to get us to the Bahamas. We've got to have a better way of doing this. And the better way was looking for some mentors. We chose Mark and Jackie because they seemed to be our sort of kind of people. And 3 months later, we had actually got our strategy in place. We knew what we were doing, we knew where we were doing it, which was HMOs and single lets in South Wales, and we learnt how to, we actually got 2 houses bought, and we learnt how to recycle our cash, but we also realized it was really important to attract investors. Now, because we knew that we were going to run out of money, it was stark staringly obvious. Now, I know a lot of affluent people, you know, at Oxford, big range of people from the miner's son to the Maharaj of Jodhpur. And I just know, you know, a chunk of people who've got money. But I'm also really interested in people. I get very interested in what they do and what makes them work. And my natural enthusiasm included that. And what I had learnt with NRG as a networking organization over the last 12 years meant that I could put that into practice, and it worked. And what happened was, over 3 years, we actually ended up with about 11 joint venture deals, which is either equity or loan-based. I'll come back to that later. And we had raised over £1 million, of which about sort of £600,000 is actually tied up in property, and we've got about £700,000 ready to go, which gives us sort of confidence of what we're doing. The great thing was my son actually was in the position where he actually could stop work and start doing property full time about 2 years ago. So what this is all about in the sessions today, what I'm going to talk about in my course, is I can teach you how to meet affluent people like the ones I know, but also how to engage with them and get money. So, and I'm a mentor, have been a mentor, not in property, but also in property. So, I'm now trying, oh, here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what goes on in investors' head, where you might find them, how you engage with them, and how you put the deal to them. That's what I'm going to talk about. So the first thing is what is actually going on in an investor's head and what are they looking for. First thing to note is you can't necessarily immediately see an investor. They're not obvious. Anybody can be an investor. You don't know whether people have got money. But what you can do is actually work out some of the things that are going on in their head. And the sort of things, sorry, I was trying to get them. Here we go. So the first thing is this word credibility. You, first of all, if you don't have your credibility, you don't pass word go. And by credibility, I mean track record or knowledge. If you haven't done anything before, at least your knowledge of the subject. That's the first thing. And the second thing is confidence. Confidence, which is different from credibility. Confidence is all about sort of people having confidence in you, you know, doing what you say you're going to do, being professional, all those sort of things. Oh, right, sorry. Don't seem to have great control over the slides, but anyway, the third one is security, because deep down inside, a thing a potential investor is concerned about is that they're going to lose their money. Forget about actually making money, but so security is actually really, really, really important. And we'll talk a bit about how you might actually secure. We go into that in the course in some degree. The fourth bit is where it all comes to the crunch, because it all builds together in the word trust. Are you trustworthy? We did some work about 8 years ago with NRG and Bath University on what actually helps people build relationships in business. So to do stuff together, and it's this trust thing came up time and time again. If people will not forge the relationship with you unless they trust you. So that's at the heart of it all. And only then, when you've actually got those things together, that you'll actually then start talking about return on investment, what they actually will get out of it. And I'm not here to tell you what the right return on a deal should be. That's up to you. That's up to the deal. It's up to the person in their head. And I've done many deals. I've done deals which return 6%. I've done deals which return 12% on a sort of loan type basis. And then there's equity. And the final bit is their risk profile. This is, are they looking for short term, long term? How long are they prepared to keep their money tied up? And the interesting thing is, out of those 11 people that we've done, in quotes, joint venture deals with, actually only 3 are joint equity deals. The rest are all about loans, fixed rate, fixed return, secured on property. Okay, so that's a bit about what goes on in an investor's head. Secondly, let's move on to where we actually might go and meet these people. Now, I'm just going to give you don't have time to go into lots of examples. I'm going to give you a few examples of sort of places where you might be able to meet them. So where do you find them? Let's start with friends and family. And the reason I say starting with this is because you actually know them, they know you, a relationship already exists. The thing that usually stops people getting involved with friends and family is precisely because of that relationship. And it's the fear, oh gosh, if I lose this money, if I don't do this with Auntie Jane's money, that's going to be catastrophic. And it's guarding that relationship that you kind of is in your mind. So you have to be really confident that you can actually deliver. The next bit is to do with experts is social media. Now, online, now, some people, Mark can do this, I find it difficult. Mark can actually go out and establish new relationships with new people online, and they build into relationships. He's very good at doing this. I am less good at this. I'm good at following people up once I've had the one-to-one, face-to-face stuff, and keep the top up with the relationship. But it's kind of, but a lot of people can't. Thirdly, now you ask where rich people hang out. This is, golf clubs are where some wealthy people do hang out. You find a lot of wealthy people at golf clubs. The only challenge is, if you're going to participate, you need to play golf. I can't, so I don't. And I think but the point I'm trying to make here is, wherever you go, whatever type of organization, meeting, wherever you want to meet people, ideally meet people where there is some common interest, there is something to talk about, something to get the juices flowing. Now, charity events are another great way of actually meeting people. My wife organizes lots of charity events, helps organize things, and yes, there are a lot of people who spend lots of money there. So it's a great way of bringing people that you may have met in other walks of life and actually bringing them to this social occasion as your guest and entertaining them and building the relationship. I have one of our members, and he's a mate, young chap, who actually is a member of the Reform Club. That's the Reform Club in London, in Pall Mall. And I asked him, why are you a member? Because it's costing him 1,500 quid a year. And he said, well, for two reasons. One is because it's a place I can bring my prospects and clients to be with them, impress them, build the relationship. And also, they run networking events there. There's also some very interesting and wealthy people who are members themselves. You have to be nominated by a member. I know members of the Reform Club, so I do that. However, just up the road from the Reform Club is the IOD building and the Institute of Directors. And actually, I find that very useful because, for me, the sort of people who frequented there are very, they tend to be people who've kind of made it. And people who've made it in business tend to have money. So I actually go to the IOD quite a lot. And then there are networking events. I generally find at the property networking events, if people have money, they're there because they want to do stuff themselves. So I don't find that property networking events are fantastic places for meeting people who potentially want to JV, unless they're on their journey and they're looking to team up with somebody who's got more skill and expertise. I tend to find it more useful at more general networking events. I've run about 3,000. This is one of ours. I've run about 3,000 of these events over the last 12 years. But this is the thing I feel really, really strongly about. A lot of people go to networking events as a vehicle just to sell. And if you think that you actually can go there and within sort of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you can get into the selling bit, you probably will be sadly mistaken as to whether it's going to work or not. If, however, you go along with a view that's saying, I'm there to look and find interesting people with, rapport, I get on with, and find out more and just be interested in other people, then you've got more of a chance for networking events to succeed for you. I feel really strongly about that. So I always say at our networking events, hey, who's come here to buy? Usually nobody puts their hands up. Right, in that case, don't sell. Build the relationships first. Okay, so that's a whiz through some of the places that you can find people. There are lots of others. Now, so you've met somebody. How do you go about positioning yourself? How do you engage with somebody when you've met them? I'm going to go through, I'm going to give you 3 tips as to what you might do to succeed in this building the right sort of relationship for. And the first one is all to do with clarity. And by this I mean being clear in your own mind about who you're looking for and what they want. We've kind of been through that a bit. But then there is what you do. This is the answer to the question, so what do you do? And it has to be something, not I'm in property, but you have to convey, they want to know a bit about this. And one of it is actually how you add value. What is it that makes it work? So you might say, well, you know, we're in the business of acquiring land in order to get planning gains. Then people get an idea of where you add the value. Now, here is the $64,000 sort of question. You have to be able to answer why you do what you do. And the reason for that is whatever you do and however you do it, people will only really remember, really respond, really get attracted by why you do it. It's the why that really moves the ball forward. So, as far as I'm concerned, when I set up NRG, that was all about, the reason why I set up NRG is when I left corporate, I didn't miss the company, but I did miss the company. I did miss the people. And what I found is I was sort of struggling to get going in running my own business, very lonely, sitting in an office at home, also known as a sort of spare bedroom, as you were doing it, and it was wanting to meet like-minded people to share the sort of ideas and issues that you have. And so the reason I set up NRG was all about providing that support community for like-minded people. That's why I set up NRG. The reason why I'm in property is because of that. I missed the opportunity to do it with my father. I'm certainly not going to miss the opportunity to do it with my son. And so that's why I feel really strongly about it. And what we do when I go through on the course is we spend a chunk of time investigating your why, the reason why you get out of bed to do this, because that's what makes you attractive to other people. And the vehicle that one uses to talk about this is stories. You know, storytelling is the best way. People will remember stories, and if you can get a handful of stories about what you do, how you add value, why you do it, who you do it with, you will be remembered. So that's clarity. Now, the second one is being interested in people. Now, that chap there is Dale Carnegie, wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People back in 1934, something like that. And here he says, you can read it yourself, you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. And it works. And this is about being really interested in the other person. This is about making them feel special. I had the privilege to be in the same room seeing Margaret Thatcher when she was Prime Minister many years ago. And she had this special quality that when she was talking to you, it was 100% focused on you. Nobody else in the room mattered. There was none of this looking over the shoulder to see if there was a more interesting person that she could move on to. And, so, and that is a very, very extraordinary thing. I'm sure you will have observed it meeting sort of some people. And the only thing I would say about it, this really works. This really, really, really works. I remember having a conversation with a guy after one of our networking events for about a quarter of an hour or so. And I was just asking him questions about what he did, and that's interesting, tell me more, how does that work, and all the sort of simple questions. So I probably he spent about 90% of the time talking, and I spent about 10%. And so we did that. I went off and I was talking to somebody else, and I actually heard him say, God, that Martin Davis is really, really interesting. We had a really good conversation. And the reason was very simple. It was because he was talking about his favorite subject, himself. And the only other comment I'd make about this particular thing is that if you're going to be interested, you've got to mean it. And the following tip is follow up. Following up after that initial meeting, and most relationships building stop stone dead after that first relationship because people think they've done enough to have made the impact. And it's like making friends. When you made friends all those years ago, you probably didn't become friends in the first moment. It probably took you some time to build that relationship up. And that's exactly the same in building business relationships in any way. So it's doing all the little things, the following up, the touches that start building the relationships. And what I would suggest is that when you've met somebody, say at a networking meeting, you click, you rapport, you look as though there's something interesting there, you actually say, you actually sort of specify what the next action might be. Either, why don't we go and have a cup of coffee, can I connect with you on Facebook or LinkedIn, or you say something, can I drop you an email, which I'm talking about, or can I send you an article, which we were talking about, because I think it's quite interesting, something to step that relationship forward. Okay, so there we go. So I've talked about where you meet them, how you engage them, and then there's going to become a magic moment where the person says, so tell me more about the deal. So they're giving you, so this is where you're moving from networking mode into selling mode. So I think you need to have prepared something. This is what I prepared earlier, and I think you need to be able either to talk about or ideally to give them something, which is your property business proposal. This is actually a real one I prepared back in 2014, and it contains, first page, bit about market summary, then focusing on the particular property niche that I'm interested in. As a chunk about our track record, these are the properties that we have, these are the deals we've done, just sort of so track record going in there. And then we have a summary of our business plan, which presumes that you've actually got a business plan, saying that this is what we're looking to do over the next 2 years, and then you have the offer. Now you kind of have to have had the conversation with them, which says, are they likely to be an equity or loan, or whatever it is, but there's the offer. And then I always include, right at the end, a page on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, SWOT analysis, just to show that you kind of know what you're talking about. And that really that does actually work. So they actually turn around and say, let's do it. Let's do it. There are lots of different legal arrangements which you can go through, and here's an example. It's a loan example, not an equity example, of how we actually went about and did it. And we used 2 documents that are available from the land registry. CH1 form, which is the loan agreement, so it has borrower and lender details, how much the loan is, what the interest rate is, what the interest payable, when do you pay it, and how much, so do you pay it as you go along, or do you pay it at the end, or whatever. And most importantly, what are the key terms? What happens if you die? What happens if they die? What happens if at the end of the term you haven't repaid the loan? What happens then? Do they have the right to force a sale or whatever? That's the loan agreement. You can do it on an ordinary piece of paper and get it both signed, but I find that the CH1 is better because you should be lodging this with the land registry. And then the second one is the security bit. And there are various ones which you can do. There's one where you actually have a formal legal charge. First charge is always great, but that may or may not be possible because of other rates, other loans and things like that. So something like an AN1 is often used. I've used that several times. And this is an agreed notice which basically says you have an interest in that property, the property that's secured. It doesn't have to be the same property that the loan is taken to do stuff with. And again, it's got a borrower and lender details and the secured property, the property it's working on. There are lots of other ways of doing it, but that is just an example of this. So let me now just so the fifth P in the 5P attraction system is about a plan. Because if you're going to do this, you really ought to do it in a coherent way. So this is what I would sort of suggest are the sort of things that you might want to do, the steps you might want to go through in order to build up the right relationships with people who've got money. And the first thing is you need to be very clear about about who you're looking for. You need to have a picture in your mind about sort of the type of person that you're looking for and what's going on in their head. You need to decide. Hello? Oh, that was fun. You then need to decide where you're going to find them. So where you're going to networking, are you doing it with friends and family, or you actually know the people, you're building existing relationships that you happen to have. And then you need to build your proposition, the what do you do, how you add value, and your story. This is the why bit and all of that. You need to be really, really comfortable about that. So when you do engage, you're authentic, I think is the word I would use. And then you need to make sure you're happy about how you go about engaging with them. And I've been through these three things, which are just, there are lots of other things, but those are three things which I think are important. You need to have your collateral with you, your property business proposal. You need to have that organized. It shows you're professional, and then just go ahead and do it. So that's kind of where we are in terms of, I've rattled through the 5P system of how you go about engaging. Are there any questions so far?
Hi Martin, okay.
Hello, no questions.
Lots of interesting info. Let me just pull up the questions panel. Okay, so got a question here from another Mark. Basically says, okay, you've built the relationship, but how do you determine whether you offer an interest rate or a share of the deal?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I suppose the easy answer is you just ask them. And you could say, well, what is it that you want? But what I would possibly do is ask the question about sort of what's their attitude to risk. And I had this conversation the other day with an investor, and I had the opportunity, and it was a really attractive deal. It was land acquisition, planning gain, pretty good returns in a very reasonable time scale. And I said, so what do you want to do, Andrew? Do you want to, we've got two ways we can go on this one. We can either do it as a sort of as an equity deal where you take a slice of the action, or we can do it as a simple loan agreement where, I'm paying you interest rate. But let's talk about, and one is higher rate of return, but let's talk about the risk associated with this. So what's your propensity for risk? And we talk about how they feel. How would you feel if? And if the relationship has been built well enough, then you can have quite a candid conversation about their propensity for risk. And he turned round to me and said, do you know what? I would feel much more comfortable if I got a fixed rate of return. I knew where I was, and then I don't have to worry about, you know, is it all going to happen and everything like that. I said, well, how would you feel if you gave me, you know, if I'm giving you a certain rate of interest and I actually earned 5 times that? And he said, do you know, I feel okay about that. So it's just talking it through. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. So we've got a question from Kat. Says, how do you explain your borrowed finances to a mortgage lender, as they like to know where your deposit's from?
Well, there's a good question. And the yes. Well, what you don't do is you take the money in to your bank account on day 1 and on day 2 swing it into, you know, because that's obvious. So you've got various things. Forward planning says that if you have had the money more than about 90 days or so, 3 months or so, then that's usually as far as people go back in the sort of looking at bank account details. Sometimes that's actually not possible because time doesn't allow. Usually then you're into a joint ownership situation, then obviously the deposit is okay. But then you have to have conversations about sort of, do they want to be a joint owner and things like that. I could go into more detail, but
Yeah,
those are
I think it's one of those kind of open-ended questions, isn't it? Really, a lot is down to how you structure the whole thing. So I understand where you're coming from, Kat, and it's not a simple question to answer. But there are, let's just put it this way, there are legal ways of doing what you want to do. Okay, it's just at the moment, judging from your question, it's just a lack of understanding, and that's all. And we can show you how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so a similar sort of question from Paul and Tom, talking about the fixed return. So Paul's saying, do you find people who want a percentage return because that's what you want? And Tom is saying, wouldn't you always want to offer a fixed return rather than sharing the spoils? So a similar kind of question, but you know.
Well, I don't know. Is it that's Tom? Or is that what you want to? Is fixed return always what you want to offer? It's horses for courses. If what I haven't talked about is sophisticated investors and FCA stuff, because actually there may be situations where you cannot offer shared risk and equity position because the person who is the investor is not a sophisticated or a high net worth investor. So I've got a situation where happened to be a friend of mine invested. He wanted to invest not a big sum of money. He wanted to invest, and we did it on an equity basis because he was a high net worth. He actually qualified as a high net worth individual. There's some really, you know, either more than £100,000 or more than £250,000 worth of net assets. So that was fine. His fiancée comes to me and says, I want to do this deal and I want the same as him. And I talk to her and I say, no, I can't do that because you're not a sophisticated investor. She was recently divorced, new to all of this stuff, didn't have either the income or the capital or whatever. So I said, but what we can do, and I just did a straightforward loan, and it's a sort of a revolving loan deal. So it's kind of what they want, it's kind of what you want, and it's not necessarily one size fits all, I find.
Yeah. What in your experience of the deals you've done to date, are most of those on a fixed return, or are most of those on a shared, or is it kind of equal? How does it actually work for you at the moment?
Well, out of the 11 in quotes joint venture deals that I have struck over the last 3 years, only 3 are shared equity. My experience is that when push comes to shove, even though potential investors may be attracted to a slice of the action, when it actually comes down to it, what they actually want is a decent return, but a fixed return. So my experience is most people actually want to go down the loan route.
And would you say that is more to do with your mindset or theirs?
No, I think it's actually just talking about it with them in terms of their risk, their propensity for taking on risk. Because I believe quite firmly that you've actually got to talk about the risks associated with this stuff. I mean, you can get good returns, very good, far higher returns than investing your money in the bank, clearly, but there are risks associated with it, and it's how you actually mitigate the risks that determine your success. And so I think it's important to talk to potential investors about the risks involved and the rewards, but let's talk about what could go wrong and what you do. And then you let them make up their mind about which position. You might not want to do the equity position at all. You might turn around and say, I'm not in the business of doing that, but that's fine. That's your decision. I'm happy to live with either.
Okay. Got a question from Melanie, and I'm assuming fairly new investor. So she says, I presume that equity deals are higher risk than fixed return.
For whom? Well,
yes, both aspects, really, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, potentially, because let's understand it. It depends on the agreement that you write. But if you write a fixed rate loan agreement, you're saying, I'm going to borrow that amount of money over this period, I will pay you this amount of money. If your property deal goes, tits up, then you still have a loan agreement where you have to pay a certain amount of money. That you're taking the property risk. They're not taking the property risk. So, yeah, I mean, there is potentially less risk associated with the rate of return and the loan stuff. It depends what sort of partners you're after, is what I would say.
Okay, yeah, I think
goes back to the previous question.
Yeah, no, I think it was. If she was actually had another comment, it was for the investor. So I presume the equity deals are higher risk than fixed return for the investor.
Well, in a nutshell, yes, because they have the inherent property risk associated with it.
Yeah. Okay. So Paul's asking, what can we learn on the course?
Oh, that's a good question. Can I go on to the next chart?
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
Right. So this is the course. Right. So basically, I teach you the 5P attraction system. So we go through getting into the mind of potential investors, being able to build your proposition, and we actually go through and do it. Working out your why you do what you do, and being able to tell stories that relate to that and what you do. We do all of that. Actually going through and getting a plan as to how you're going to find potential investors, whether they're from existing contacts, whether it's from new people, where you might find them, and whether it's through various people that you know to their contact. So, it's how you actually find, how you engage with them. So it talks about sort of the relationship building aspects of it all. How to work out if your investor is a sophisticated investor. How you go about producing a business proposal for your property, and how you actually present that. How you actually talk about people, whether they should be, equity or loan, whether they have the propensity to do that. How you actually structure the deal, and there's the documents that go with it. So it's all of the stuff that I've talked about we cover, and there's a lot of emphasis on practical stuff. So you actually end up with a plan, a real live 90-day plan to do stuff. The course is draft documents, yes. The course is 2-day course, 19th and 20th, the weekend of the 19th and 20th of March in Farnham, and it's £1,200 plus VAT. And it's interesting, I was talking about value. Somebody said, well, what's the value I get out of that? And the best way that I could kind of work it out is that this is what I learned over the last 3 years. Well, it's actually what I've learned over the last umpty years, I suppose. But it's what I've put together as a result over the last 3 years. The money that I raised came out of this sort of knowledge. So I can truthfully say that the knowledge that is in this course is worth over £1 million to me.
I would second that. I think we've had a couple of more questions pop up, Martin, just very quickly before you go on to that. So Scott, he's asked a question about structure, which you've just covered. Kat has said, has it ever happened that finances have been promised, but when it came to providing them, they've let you down? Do you try to tie them in early so that if they pull out, they have to cover one of your costs?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And touch wood, luckily, as far as I'm concerned, that's never happened to me. But I can actually understand that happening. I can actually understand that, and here's the challenge. Do you go for the deal first and then the investment, or do you line up the investment and go for the deal? It's a catch-22 situation because you want the two coming together. And I actually think it takes longer to line up investors so that they're actually ready to rock and roll than it is to get the deals. Because typically when deals come up, there's a sudden time pressure on them in many cases. And do I think there are going to be times when an investor, you lose them? Possibly. But it's if you have the right relationship with them, then they'll probably give you a chunk of time to go and get the deal working. It's all about if you have the right relationship, I think.
Okay. And one other question just popped up, which is quite a valid one actually. So that's great. Why is your course better than any of the other ones that are out there covering this stuff?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I think that I don't know anybody else doing exactly what this is all about. I know that there are other people doing the some of the technical stuff. I don't know anything else which is actually about the building the relationship bit of it all. I haven't found it, and that's what I actually think is the most important thing.
Absolutely, relationships without a shadow of a doubt. I think the number of deals that we've done, similar kind of thing, is the relationship.
I was reflecting. Sorry, just to
Yeah.
interrupt you, Mark. Let me reflect on this. I was talking about this with somebody. I was reflecting on this the other day, and it occurred to me in my business life and where one's had successes. You know, there've been moments where you've had a run of success in whatever. And I was reflecting, and it usually is always coincided with a time when there's been a strong relationship that has been formed. And I think it's people that trump everything, you know, in this stuff. You have the right if you build the right relationships, not just property, anything. It could be just business, you know. It really it helps. I'll tell you something. And I'm going back to the NRG stuff. And we actually asked our members about 3 years ago. We actually did a survey, and we said, if you were to lose everything, what is the most important? What is the most important business asset that you have? And we were thinking customers and product and whatever. And skill came first, and a smidgen behind that said my personal network. And I believe that very strongly. I think it's the relationships you build, and if you build the right relationships, they will stay with you in terms of the money bit for longer than you think. Relationships first.
Okay, great, thank you.
So anyway, the point on this particular slide, just to make the point, as an inducement to sign up, not tonight because we're getting to the end of tonight, but by the end of tomorrow, so the next 24 hours, in addition to the course, you'll get an extra 4 hours one-to-one mentoring from me, because I recognize that some of this stuff, yeah, you come away with a plan, you do stuff, and then you look at it afterwards, you say, oh, actually, how does that, oh, what do I do now? You know, so it's and you can cover that as in one session or as, you know, in chunks.
Absolutely. So there's a link on the bottom of your screen. So if you click on that link, or sorry, type that link into your URL, that will take you straight through to the website where you can book onto the course. It is only a couple of weeks away, and we are already just over half full on that course. So we limit numbers. I think I should mention that it's not one of those courses where you're going to find 60, 70 people, okay? Because of the nature of the course, and this is common with all the courses that we run, they're very interactive, and in order to make them interactive, we make sure that numbers are limited. So numbers on this particular course are limited to 20 people only. So if it's something that you think is going to help benefit you, and I can't see why it wouldn't, because every investor needs to find money at some stage of their investing career. So if that's you, type that link to URL and book, and take advantage of that amazing offer that Martin's just made, because I wasn't aware of that. The 4 hours individual mentoring that he's prepared to chuck in as well, which is worth more than to the course alone. Okay, so really, I think that's about the end, Martin. Yeah, anything else you want to add?
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
I'd like to thank you for the opportunity of being able to share this stuff.
Fantastic. I think it's one of those areas where a lot of investors get confused about. They're not too sure. They've tried it and it hasn't worked. But finding someone that's actually succeeded at it you know, is an added bonus. So I've sent everybody through a link, which if you just click on that link now, it'll take you through to the course. And yeah, thanks very much for your attention this evening, and we wish you a very good rest of your Thursday evening. Thanks very much.